I want to take a quick moment and thank my patrons for all the support. I really appreciate it. If you're interested in watching my videos with no ads and early access, please consider joining my Patreon. You can join for as little as $1 a month, and it really helps the channel out. Or if you want to help the channel in other ways, consider clicking the like button or subscribing to the channel. It is definitely greatly appreciated. Thank you. Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your innkeeper, and today we will be finishing out our reviews for the subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. We will be talking about the wizard. And a quick note about these reviews, these are not in-depth analysis or deep dives to each of these subclasses. It's my first impressions based on what I read in the book, and my opinions on it are based on the reading of the book, but they can change later if I see these played at the table in different ways. The first subclass that we'll be discussing today is the Bladesinger. So when you choose this subclass at second level, you get an ability called Training in War and Song. It gives you proficiency with light armor, and you get proficiency with one type of one-handed melee weapon of your choice. You also get proficiency in the performance skill if you don't already have it. So proficiency in light armor, it's better than nothing, but it's not going to save your life in any particular way, shape, or form. So don't count on it to help you get through melee combat. And proficiency in one type of weapon, at low levels, that's decent, but at higher levels, if you're playing in what most people play in terms of campaigns, you're not necessarily going to benefit from this as much as you think you are. Because magic weapons are something that are very rare in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, unless your Dungeon Master or your campaign plays where they're more common, the chances are you're going to be stuck with proficiency in a weapon that you're not going to be able to find a magic version of, and therefore you'll be far less efficient in combat than, say, a fighter who is more versatile. And if you're proficient, if you want to use a longsword as a fighter and you find a magical axe, you can just pick that up and use it, and at least you'll have a magical weapon to attack and deal damage with. As a Bladesinger, you just get that one proficiency, and after that, you're basically just proficient in simple weapons. So it's something to think about if you're planning on going the long haul. Talk with your Dungeon Master and make sure that you understand how uncommon magic weapons are in his or her campaign, because it may be something that can affect your decision as to whether you want to play a Bladesinger or not. Second level, you also get an ability called Blade Song, and this one you activate as a bonus action, and it lasts for a minute, and you can use it a few times per day. So you can't use it if you're wearing medium or heavy armor, or if you're wearing a shield, or if you're using a two-handed weapon. So the idea that some people have of multi-classing a Bladesinger with a fighter, this severely limits the capabilities of the fighter. So you should probably take a second look as to whether it may be beneficial for you to multi-class into a class like the fighter. Anyways, when you activate this ability, you get a few benefits. You get a bonus to your armor class equal to your intelligence modifier. Your walking speed increases by 10 feet. You get advantage on dexterity acrobatics checks, and you get a bonus to constitution saving throws made to maintain concentration. Now, that's really good if you're going to be going into melee combat. The intelligence bonus to AC stacks with your dexterity bonus, so you can potentially have a very, very high AC. So now, even though you only have proficiency in light armor, if you activate this ability, then you'll actually be pretty good as far as avoiding, melee attacks and damage and stuff. And then add to this the fact that you have access to the shield spell, which is a fantastic way to increase your armor class for one round and prevent attacks from hitting you. So this makes you a very, very hard to hit target, which is great because you do not have a whole lot of hit points and you definitely don't want to get hit. And you're probably going to be concentrating on a spell, so you definitely don't want to get hit. Now, you're not going to be dealing as much damage, even from the lower levels, as a fighter or a barbarian, and your hit points are low. So you definitely want to take consideration before you go, trying to be a frontline combatant or something like that. One other thing to remember is that you are a full caster, so you do have access to some of the best spells in the game. It's usually a good idea to make use of them, and you're generally more efficient if you're using those versus trying to go into melee combat. So this is the biggest issue that I have with the subclass. It feels like the subclass is pulling you in multiple directions. It wants you to be a melee combatant. It wants you to be in the front lines. But at the same time, your main class of being a wizard is telling you, don't do that. Don't do that. You have better options in this side. Plus, you're not so resilient when it comes to being in the front line. So they do add some abilities that help boost that resilience, but I still think as a wizard, you're better off casting spells. Anyways, at 6th level, you get extra attack. So you can attack twice instead of once, and then you can replace one attack with a cantrip. It's a good ability. It allows you to make some use of your spell casting and still benefit from attacking. It's not bad. It's not super powerful, but it's definitely better than not having the option. I mean, if it were just 2 attacks with your weapon, then I would say it's really bad. In this case, you can use a cantrip so you can at least do a little bit more with your turn than just attacking in combat as a full caster. So I think this ability can make the subclass a lot more fun, and I think this one is a win in terms of, fun factor. In terms of mechanical benefits, I think it's pretty average ability. It's not strong, but it's not weak. Then at 10th level, you get Song of Defense. So when your Blade Song is active, you can use your reaction and spend a spell slot to reduce damage that you've taken. So this one is very, very expensive to use. Every 5 points of damage you want to reduce, you have to use a spell slot of 1st level or higher. So if you use a 3rd level spell slot, you can reduce the damage by 15 points of damage. That's not a whole lot if you really think about it. I mean, I'm just going to call this one out like for what it is. It's a bad ability. I just personally would never use this ability unless I'm about to be killed by damage I just took. I'd rather A, use shield spell for my reaction, B, use absorb elements to reduce the damage if needed. That's a 1st level spell. The other one's a 1st level spell, and you can potentially absorb far more than the reduction that this can grant. So if you're getting hit by fire breath, let's say, for 50 points of damage, if you use absorb elements, you're reducing that by 25 points with a 1st level spell slot. Or you can use your Song of Defense, and if you wanted to reduce 25 points of damage, you could use a 5th level spell slot. So 1st level spell slot with absorb elements, 5th level spell slot by using this ability. See the problem here? Now, of course, you're not always going to be able to just absorb elements, and you're not always going to be able to use shield. It could be a Tarrasque attacking you with a claw, and you have really no way to defend against that other than reducing damage. If that's the case, if it's going to kill you, then by all means I'd say use it. But a high-level spell slot is something that's far more valuable than the hit points that you're going to be able to reduce from this ability, in my opinion. Anyways, at 14th level, you get Song of Victory. That's your capstone. So when your Blade Song is active, you get a bonus to weapon damage. Another really subpar ability. I mean, at this level, you're casting 7th level spells. So think about that. Your extra damage is you're just adding your intelligence bonus to damage. So it's going to be maybe +5 per hit. Meanwhile, instead of attacking, you could be casting a 7th level spell or a 6th level or even a 5th level spell is going to probably be better than doing that. So overall, I like the Bladesinger for the theme and the flavor. I think it's a very thematic subclass. And I really want to like them for mechanics. But unfortunately, unless you're very planning your levels ahead very, very meticulously, or going for a specific type of combo, then this subclass is just not gonna feel good if you're playing side by side with another wizard, unless you're using like Shadow Blade combo, which I have on one of my videos. I could post the link below, or some other combos, with this subclass that are very specific. If you're just playing the subclass straight, most other wizard subclasses are gonna outshine it. Now, you could always just play the abilities for the subclass strictly as defensive abilities. Boost your armor class, wear some armor, and just still play as a normal wizard, shooting from afar, shooting from range, controlling the battlefield, and only using this subclass for defensive capability. Then I think it's going to play out a little bit better than trying to make this work as a frontline combatant that can also cast spells. There are far better options to do that with than the Bladesinger, unfortunately. Anyways, but it's it's still cool, it's still fun, and it's still a wizard. So keep in mind that when I say these things, I'm comparing it to other subclasses within the same class. If you're a Bladesinger, even the most unoptimized Bladesinger, it's still going to probably be more powerful than the most powerful monk, let's say. In my opinion, wizards are just that good. So yes, it's one of the weaker wizard subclasses, but yes, it's still a wizard, which means that it's still a strong class. So there we go. Anyways, next subclass that we're going to talk about is going to be the Order of Scribes. At second level, you get the Wizardly Quill. This one is mostly flavor and theme. It has a minor benefit. It speeds up the time required to scribe spells in your spellbook. It's okay. Sure, why not? At level 2, you also get this thing called Awakened Spellbook. So you can use your spellbook as a spellcasting focus for your wizard spells. That's pretty cool. You can change the damage type of a wizard spell of first level or higher with the damage type of another spell in your spellbook. Now, this one has been getting a lot of talk on the internet and stuff, and I've seen some wrong information on this one, so let's go ahead and clarify it. It sounds really cool, it sounds really powerful, but it has a lot of limitations that severely limit its application, and I think you're not going to see this used as much as you might think. You don't have to have the other spell memorized, it just has to be in your spellbook in order for you to benefit from its damage type. It just, the fact that it has to be of the same level is very, very limiting. There are over 10 different damage types, and I made a video talking about each damage type and which one's going to be more efficient than others, and you can watch the video in the description or, up in the top when the little thing comes up. It's highly unlikely, because there's 10 different damage types, highly unlikely that you're going to have a very specific one that you might need at that very specific spell level for a certain situation. If that's confusing you, let me kind of clarify that. Let's say you're fighting a creature that is vulnerable to fire and you want to deal it fire damage with a Cone of Cold or something. You'll need a 4th level spell slot in order to turn that Cone of Cold into fire damage. You'll need a 4th level spell in your spellbook that deals fire damage. That's kind of a tall order, to be honest. You cannot use a spell from any other spell level. It has to be a 4th level spell slot. Now, you can upcast Cone of Cold to 5th level if you happen to have a 5th level fire spell and do that. But do you see how this can be kind of limiting? As you get to higher level spell slots, it becomes increasingly more difficult to replace the damage type of that spell. Let's say, for example, you cast a 7th level spell that deals necrotic damage, and you're fighting a creature that's immune or resistant to necrotic, so you want to switch it up. You want to deal force damage. Now you have to have a 7th level spell slot that deals force damage in your spellbook in order to switch that damage type. That's kind of hard. That's a tall order. So think about this. Think about this and how often this is going to come into play. I think it'll come up quite more often than you might think. Now, my example was a very specific case. Now, if you really think about it, and if you watch the video that I just linked here, there are really 3 very good damage types that are universally good and no matter what. So if you want to be optimal, you could just focus on learning spells that do those 3 types of damage, that being Radiant, Psychic, and Force, Radiant being the most powerful of all of them. So if you have any of those 3, you're probably good, but remember, they still have to be of the same spell level of the spell you're casting, so keep that in mind. And even then, just to kind of harp on this a little bit more, not every damage type is represented in every single spell level. So if you want to cast a fireball that deals radiant damage, let's say, it's the best damage in the game. If you don't understand why I'm saying that, you can watch the video that I linked. You're going to have a hard time getting a 3rd level spell in your spellbook that deals radiant damage. You'd have to pretty much have the spell Sickening Radiance in your spellbook, and that's a 4th level spell. So you'd have to upcast your fireball to 4th level and have Sickening Radiance in your spellbook to then cast a 4th level Radiant Fireball. You will not be able to use a 3rd level Radiant Fireball, period. And if you can't cast 4th level spells yet, well then I guess you're not casting a Radiant Fireball, are you? Anyways, if you wanted to upcast the Radiant Fireball to a 7th level, let's say you want to do more. You want to upcast this Fireball, and instead of, what does a 4th level Fireball do? 96? If you want to cast it as a 7th level spell and deal whatever it is, 11 or 12 d6 damage, You can't, because at 7th level spell, there is no radiant damage spell in your spellbook at that time. Let's say you're not going to be able to upcast that fireball past 4th level if you don't have a 5th, 6th, or 7th level spell in your spellbook that deals radiant damage. So there are huge limitation implications with this ability. So it looks fantastic on paper. In theory, I think it looks really good, but I think that unless your DM lets you add any spell to your spellbook anytime, like as you level, it's going to be very prohibitive for you to find the right things that you need in order to make this efficient. Heck, I mean, I think even then, honestly, you'd be limited. Another example, so the level 2 wizard spells are pretty much limited to just fire, slashing, acid, and psychic. That's it. Unless you happen to have a spell called Dragon's Breath, which would add cold, lightning, and poison as well. But you're not going to be dealing force or radiant damage with a level 2 spell slot, because there aren't any level 2 spells that deal force or radiant damage. So think about that when you try to praise this ability as something more powerful than it actually is. Force fireballs? Yep. You'd have to upcast fireball to 5th level if you want to deal force damage with it. There are no force damage spells 3rd level or 4th level. So you would have to, and I'm pretty sure about this. I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain, 90% certain, there are no force damage wizard spells 3rd level or 4th level. So you literally have to upcast fireball to 5th level and have a force damage dealing spell in your spellbook in order to be able to cast a force fireball. So I think I've beaten this dead horse long enough. As new books come out, new source books, there's going to be more spells added to the wizard spell list, so this ability does get better as that happens. So, it's not all bad news, but just keep in mind that the limitations of this ability are far more than they seem at first glance. Another ability that you get with this spellbook is that once per long rest, when you cast a wizard spell as a ritual, you can cast it much faster. So you're using the normal casting time of the spell instead of adding 10 minutes to the casting time. Not bad at all. And then at 6th level, you get the Manifest Mind ability. As a bonus action, you get like a spectral manifestation of your spellbook to appear near you. It creates dim light without using your concentration, and it can hear and see with a 60-foot dark vision. Not bad. You can move it as a bonus action around, and it can move through creatures but not objects. And then as you move it around a dungeon, let's say, it can relay what it sees and hears back to you telepathically. So that's, now you can't actually see through it, through its eyes and things like that, but it relays the information telepathically. That may be important in any given situation. It may not be important, but just know that there's a difference than perceiving through its eyes versus it telepathically relaying information of what it sees back to you. And you can cast spells through it as if you're there in its space, which is really awesome. So this ability is very, very good. I've heard some people claim that it's broken. I don't think it's broken, but I think it's very good. It has a plethora of uses, and it can even make spells that normally suck actually good spells, like something like, say, Vampiric Touch gets much better than let me step back on that, because some people, the way they read this, Vampiric Touch, it's a touch spell, and this thing says that you can cast spells as if you're in its location, whereas a touch spell requires you to touch, and it doesn't say in this ability that it can touch things. So therefore, Vampiric Touch may not work as per your DM's ruling, so check with your DM if that's the case. But if your DM rules that you can use touch spells with it, then Vampiric Touch becomes much better when you have this ability. So, sorry to kind of mix that up, but I just wanted to be clear. Anyways, I think I'm going to definitely dive deeper into this subclass and go really deep into uses for this thing at some point, maybe a few months down the line. At 10th level, you get the Master Scrivener feature. This one lets you make scrolls more quickly for level 1 and 2 spells that you know, and then it automatically upcasts the spell by 1 level, which is pretty cool. You can only have 1 scroll made per long rest, and it lasts for the day, basically, until you finish a long rest again. So it's important to note here, you can't give the scroll to someone else, so no shenanigans of creating a spell scroll for a spell that you don't want to concentrate on, and you give it to the barbarian or whatever. That's not going to happen, because only you can read the scroll and use it. So I like it. I mean, even though it has this one limitation that only you can use it, it's basically giving you an extra spell slot of first level or second level spell upcast to either a second or third level spell each day, each long rest. So it's like basically getting an additional casting of a spell every day. That's not bad. That's pretty cool. And if you don't want to waste a memorization slot, it basically gives you an additional spell of first or second level in a way that you have memorized per se, because you can, let's say you don't want to memorize Burning Hands. You can make a scroll for Burning Hands and have that and be able to cast it and still have all your spell slots available to memorize whatever else that you did want to memorize in place of Burning Hands. And then finally, at 14th level, your capstone is called One with the Word. So while you have your spellbook with you, you have advantage on intelligence arcana checks. Plus, once per long rest, if you take damage while you have the Manifest Mind ability going, you can use your reaction to just completely ignore the damage that you just took. Holy cannoli. You lose a few spells from your spellbook for a few days, but then they come back, so it's not bad. It's a great panic button. It's way better than the Bladesinger damage reduction ability. To be fair, this is a higher level one, but still, completely negating an entire bit of damage is so good. If a dragon hits you with 120 damage breath weapon, you can negate all of it. That one damage instance is gone. It's negated. And you might have to use some spells, but hey, whatever. It's worth it if it saves your life. So I like it. It's really, really great as a panic button. You're probably not going to use it a tremendous amount, but it's so good to know that it's there. It'll let you take more risks. It'll give you like psychologically that extra push to do things you normally wouldn't do, because you know that you have that safety net that you can fall back on. I like it. Overall, I think the Order of Scribes wizard is pretty cool. It's got an interesting theme and some awesome mechanics as well. I think the abilities, some of them are kind of situational. Some of them are extremely limited, but there are some that are really standouts for power and just fun. So I think overall, the subclass is a really good addition to the wizard subclasses. I don't expect that you're casting a lot of non-cantrip damaging spells as a wizard to begin with, so the limitations of that ability are not going to be as glaring if you're playing your wizard more as a controller. If you're trying to be a wizard that just deals damage, then you'll really notice the limitations of that ability that lets you switch the damage types. But I suspect that most people who play wizards are not going to be trying to deal damage in every combat, so you're not going to notice it as much as you think. So to summarize, the Bladesinger feels like a subclass that's well suited for new players who are intimidated by the complexity of playing a wizard, but they want to dive into the shallow end of the pool, while at the same time not be left out of the combat, of the melee combat. It has enough to make it a decent spellcaster. The defensive bonuses are easier for players who aren't making tactical decisions, and they, don't want to stay out of melee, let's say. For those who are typing away right now, if you're typing, stop. I know what you're saying. Because I called this a great class for beginners, you think that I'm calling anyone who plays a Bladesinger a beginner. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's a great subclass for beginner players, but it is one of the weaker wizard subclasses. So if you're an experienced player and you're making a Bladesinger work, that means that you're probably more advanced than your average player, because you really have to work hard to make this one work great. So if you have tactics or if you have plans of very specific combos you're working on, you're probably far more advanced tactically than your average player if you're using a Bladesinger. So I'm not trying to insult anyone by saying you're a beginner for using the Bladesinger. Not at all. Anyways, I think a lot of the abilities, even if you're making it work, a lot of them are situational. A lot of them are very subpar. So it's unfortunate that this subclass, being so cool thematically, does have those misses, but overall it's still fun. I like it, even though I personally believe it's one of the weaker wizards out there. And the Order of Scribes is a great subclass option. It adds a lot of versatility and function to the wizard class. There are some situational abilities in this one too that Some are good, some are very good, and some are very situational. But the ones that are very good are very, very good, and they skyrocket this subclass to the top 5 subclasses for wizards. Now, I wouldn't necessarily claim that this is the top wizard subclass, not by any means. In fact, I don't even think it's a top 3, but it is top 5, so it is in the top tier, I believe, of wizard subclasses. In terms of theme, I think both of the wizard subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything are really interesting. They all have a lot of roleplay capabilities and value, and if roleplaying is what you're after, then both subclasses are major wins in terms of flavor. So let's go ahead and rank the subclasses real quick. When I rank these subclasses, like I briefly mentioned, I rank them based on versus other wizard subclasses. So I'm not saying if something is bottom tier that it's going to be the worst experience ever. No. Wizards are probably the strongest class in the game. Even the worst wizard is probably better than the best monk. Oh, I can't wait till people start downvoting because I made that statement. But I believe that is a fact. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get to it. So for bottom tier, I think, unfortunately, we have the Bladesinger. And if you want more information on my wizard rankings, I do have a video where I ranked all the wizards except for the order of Scribes because it wasn't out yet. But if you want more information as to my reasonings why, you can check out the video. I'll link all 3 in the comments, and I'll link the one where the Bladesinger is in on top here. So mid-tier, there are no wizard subclasses in Tasha's that fall into the mid-tier. And for top tier, I think the Order of Scribes definitely has its place in the top tier for wizard subclasses. And that's it for my first impressions of the subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. This is the last video of this series. I hope that you found this video and this series helpful. If you did, please consider clicking the like button. If you have any questions or comments, don't forget to leave them
down there
in the comments down below. As always, I'm your Innkeeper. This is the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk with you then.